So you're thinking of living in New Jersey, or perhaps you already live here and you're just looking for a new town to call home with a new vibe? Well, today we're going to talk about something in real estate that can make your transaction really easy. Easier. Better for you if you understand it. So if learning a little bit of a secret with real estate sounds, in your wheelhouse, stay tuned because we're getting after it right now. If this is your first time to the Living in New Jersey channel, please feel free to click the subscribe button, tap the bell for notifications so you can be the first to be alerted to the ever-changing New Jersey real estate market and awesome videos like this one. My name is Matthew Williamson. I'm a luxury realtor here in New Jersey, and the person I have with me today, for one, is someone that can make all the difference in any real estate transaction, and that is a real estate attorney. And to be clear, they are not all created equal. So today, I brought in the boss, my preferred legal representation, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Matthew. So my name is Gretchen Oleg. I am a partner at Phelan, Franz, Oleg, and Wegbright. We are a firm in Westfield, New Jersey, and we do residential real estate transactions throughout the state. And I'm very happy to be here with one of my preferred agents, Matthew Williamson, today.
That's me. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the thing that the secret, what we're gonna talk about today that can make your life perhaps easy or easier in a real estate transaction is something that you may have heard, and it's called U&O. And to be fair, that's not UFO. That's U and. That's with like the ampersand sign,
Yep.
the fancy stuff, which we do fancy stuff because she's legal representation. so U&O, and that is short for use and occupancy, I believe. I'm going to give the baton back to her because she knows way more about this in detail than I do. Knowing about U&O can make all the difference in a transaction because sometimes it's in the fine print. When you're going to buy a house and maybe your realtor sees it, maybe he doesn't, maybe it kind of comes in later in the game, as it were, in the transaction, or deciding to make an offer at the start of the transaction, you'll see something like, what's U&O? What's use and occupancy? What does that mean? Well, Gretchen's going to tell you.
So I think it's important to understand the context in which a use and occupancy may come up. And essentially what it means is that one party wants to continue to live or have access to the property before we've actually closed, before title, which is ownership, has changed hands. Maybe it's better if we role play. I'm buying a house. You're selling a house.
I'm a seller.
I really want to buy your house.
Excellent.
Right? Interest rates are going up, right?
Yeah, they are.
So I see your house. I give you an offer that you can't refuse, but you need some time. You're not ready.
I don't have any
to
place
close.
to go yet.
Right. But I want to lock in my interest rate and close. I don't want to wait for 2 months because the interest rate may go up, and up. If we're agreeable, we can deal during attorney review with something called a use and occupancy. And essentially what that means is that we would close the transaction. So I would now own your home, but you would stay under a use and occupancy, a U&O. You would essentially rent back from me. And the terms of that differ. They vary deal to deal, but that's sort of the general concept. It allows the seller to remain in the property, to use and occupy the property, U&O, after closing, after title has transferred to the buyer.
Like you said, the buyer, I accept the offer, but maybe the closing date per se that you're looking for on the contract at least was pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, hey, I can't close that quick. I got nowhere to go yet, or I'm the seller. Maybe I have found a house, but I can't close on that house as fast as you want to close here. Obviously, as you explained, without being too repetitive, you want to keep your rate. You want to lock it in with your lender. I don't want to be homeless as the seller, so I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, title will change. You will become the owner of the home, right?
Right.
But you, as the buyer, have not moved in, and I'm, in a sense, going to rent from you.
Correct.
Are there some nuances here where legalities in that situation that, at least for an albeit temporary amount of time, that legally you're a landlord?
You're technically not a landlord, and there's language because there are tenant-landlord laws that you don't want to trigger by virtue of a use and occupancy, which is usually short in duration. I mean, you really, honestly, if I'm getting a loan, my lender is not going to allow me to get a loan if I'm not going to occupy the premises within 60 days, right?
There
So
it
a
is.
use and occupancy is relatively short. So it's not technically a landlord-tenant relationship, but there are some similarities. For instance, we have to negotiate and agree, are you going to pay me rent? And what is that rent? What is it? Is it going to be whatever my mortgage is? You know, I have had situations where I've had buyers that in a highly competitive market will allow a seller to remain for a very short period of time rent-free. So it's all circumstantial. So the use and occupancy agreement will document what is the amount of money that you're going to pay me to continue to live in the house. It's also going to have some language about escrow and amount of money being held at closing. If you're going to net $500,000 from the sale of your home, I'm going to keep a chunk of that as the attorney.
Okay.
And it's going to guarantee, number one, that you're going to pay me my rent.
Okay.
And number two, that if there's damage to the property, right, because now you're living there in a property I own, if you've damaged it, that I have some, it's almost like what you would think of as a security deposit.
It's sort of similar,
Yeah.
some similarities
Exactly.
to that.
Because attorneys think of all the awful things, right? We also have language that says if Matthew's supposed to move out on December 3rd and he doesn't, then there's a per day penalty, and that I can collect from that escrow to get you out of the house on time.
I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be kicked out. So when I'm living in that home under the UNO, so as the seller in that scenario, I've sold the home to you, title deed, all that's in your name now, but I'm still occupying it. And obviously, like you said, you have kind of escrow money. There's certain language, things that you guys do. Is one of those, and it sounds silly, but you know it's going to come up as, the new owner of the property is going to be like, what about this? What about like utilities?
Sure.
Right? Do I pay that as the person, like as the previous owner, but still living in the home? Am I paying those utilities, or is that something that also kind of gets agreed upon and ironed out?
Yeah, no, the utilities will typically stay in the seller's name because you just won't change the account over until you've actually vacated, and then the buyers will change the account. So utilities will stay in your name. One of the things that changes, though, is insurance, right? Particularly if I'm getting a loan from a bank, I need to get homeowners insurance to cover that property. I'm going to get that from day one, from the day of closing. So you're going to have to talk to your insurance company and change the terms of your insurance to almost like a renter's insurance. So you're insuring the contents of the home, and I'm insuring the property.
It sounds complex, kind of, but it's not really.
I mean, I think it's standard. I think it happens so often that insurance companies are familiar with it. So I've never had the insurance piece be an issue.
In any instance, and this is once again thinking of nightmarish things, but as you said, the seller, if they have to be out by a certain day, and they're not, right?
Yeah.
Is there any, and this probably sounds silly, but I guess it needs to be asked, because if you're a buyer, and maybe especially it's a first-time home buyer situation, right? And your first situation is a UNO situation. You are now the owner. The old owner is still living in the house.
Yeah.
Can the previous owner that is now living in their home that's not really their home anymore, is there been a situation where they just don't want to leave?
Look, I've said to you a million times, I can draw the most perfect use and occupancy agreement, but I can't stop crazy from being crazy, right? So it is use and occupancy agreements. I think in a perfect world, from an attorney's perspective, if you can avoid them, ideally, because these sorts of situations don't come up. Also, I think in a really competitive market, you need an attorney and a realtor who can be creative and get you in the home that you want, even though circumstances might not be ideal. And using a use and occupancy is one of the ways that you can be creative and get your offer accepted.
True.
Do you have crazy being crazy sometimes? You do, and that's why you have language in the agreement that provides for the penalty. God forbid you have to go to court. Those are the risks that you have to think about when you're considering whether you want to make an offer and agree to a use and occupancy.
We've talked a bit, or pretty much all of this, on UNO from the perspective of a buyer, basically leasing back the house to the old owner who's now living in there until they have a place to go.
Sure.
Bringing up sort of this other cursed subject to not talk too much on it, but there is kind of a mirror image version of the UNO, which we won't talk about a lot because it's cautionary tale on this, but just to cover the base, to at least acknowledge that there is this other side of the coin, this dark side of the moon, if you will. What does the other scenario look like?
Well, so you can have it flipped, right? You can have a use and occupancy agreement where the seller still owns the property, but the buyer needs access early. So maybe their lease ends on the 31st, they're closing on the 10th, there's a 10-day period. Maybe they need, access to the property early. I'm really not a fan of those just because I think the liability and the exposure is bigger. But again, If that's a situation and you need to creatively plan to allow the parties to close, then there is that option as well. So the question then becomes similar, right? What protection am I going to give my seller in the event that the buyers, are storing some stuff in the garage and the garage blows up or something crazy like that? It does happen on both sides of the coin. I think the situation where the seller remains is much more common.
Between the two, only because you brought it up just a second ago, not being a big fan of the one where the buyer needs early access to the property because the liability is different. How does the liability slightly change? If someone's watching this and they're saying, well, whether the buyer moves in early, needs access, or the seller, stays, and this, that, and the other, because they sound similar, kind of tongue twisted, but from a liability perspective,
well, title hasn't changed hands, right? And so in the second scenario, although there's risks, the ownership of the property has now shifted. And so there's less of a concern of mayhem. But in the first scenario, title remains with the seller. And so particularly if I'm representing a seller, I don't really love the idea of somebody else having access to that house before title has actually changed hands and ownership.
In a silly way, which this is in no means a legal jargon talk, but it's basically, at least on paper, it's sort of like a stranger having early access to the house that they don't own yet.
Well, right. And if you're a seller's attorney, the questions are, what if they move in and all of a sudden, they find a whole bunch of issues with the house that they didn't identify during the inspection period, right? Oh, well, there's a crack in the ceiling there. And all of a sudden, now you've sort of opened a Pandora's box from a seller's perspective. You've negotiated inspections, that door is closed, we're not going to talk about it again. But if you let the buyers in, who knows what might come up.
When it comes to UNO, yes, there are two sides to just about every coin, but one side is dark side. You don't want to go there. So to be clear, because you're probably like, oh, this is a lot of information. So to be clear, where title hasn't changed hands, where the buyer says, I need early access, but the seller still has title, not the preferred route. And then obviously the other one where the title and ownership changes hands to the new buyer, but the seller says, I don't want to be homeless. I need to stay here.
Right.
I'll rent this house back from you. That is the preferred version of UNO.
And more typical version. But yeah, definitely a little less risky.
All right. Well, down below in the description will be my information, will be Gretchen's information. So feel free to, leave comments. Feel free to reach out to us, email, text, call. As I always kind of jokingly say, don't fax people. I mean, you may deal in faxes. Don't fax.
You can fax me.
You can fax her. I'll put her fax number down below. Don't fax me. Call, text, email. You can social media me. But everything will be down below. Once again, if you got value out of this, which I hope you did, feel free to click the subscribe button, tap the bell for notifications, and hope to see you around the block. See you at the next video. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.